FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
At some point, you finally give up and you say, look, this isn't going to work. And so you have to go the other direction and start embracing your identity, which I did. And there's no question the absolute hardest thing that I've ever done in my life was telling my children I was transsexual. Because you have to understand, I was kind of the alpha male. You know, I had alpha business leader, I was alpha dad, I coached Little League, I coached football, I drove fancy cars, I had Mercedes, I had workshops, I built a muscle car as a hobby. You know, I created myself into the antithesis of what I really knew myself to be, which I think is typical of many transgender people, is you create a life and an image really the opposite of who you know yourself to be. I mean, you know, I built recycling plants, refineries. You know, I worked for wrecking companies, managed, you know, refineries, drove 18-wheelers, served in the Navy. I mean, there was no macho job that I wasn't trying to do. And, you know, I was the last person in the world anybody thought that could be like this. And so when I identified myself to my family and friends, basically they all went the other direction. I lost all my family. Basically, my brother told me that he thought I would end up homeless and on drugs. I did end up homeless, but not on drugs. That I'd never be able to get a job, and that he owned his own company, said he would never hire someone like me. My sister, who was very religious, set up an intervention for me, which didn't work. My other brother just stopped calling me. My two sons rejected me. They said they need time to process information. My daughter, fortunately, she was very supportive, but kind of drifted in and out, and all my business acquaintances disappeared. All my friends disappeared. And actually, until just a few months ago, the only person that I ever talked to or knew from my previous life was my daughter. I mean, think about it. Every single person who was in my life prior to transition left my life. And the only link between my former life and my current life was my daughter. You know, when I started transitioning, you know, expenses are high. Fortunately, I had some money. A lot of transgender people don't. To pay for electrolysis and pay for therapy, and I was going to therapy 3 times a week, and electrolysis twice a month, or if not more. You know, 200 hours of electrolysis. I mean, it's a nightmare, and it's also very expensive. And so once I ran out of money, I started selling possessions. I had an antique Mercedes. I sold it, a Cartier watch. I sold it, you know, golf clubs, whatever else I had, every ounce of clothing I had. Because keep in mind, when you're transgender, you transition, you have nothing. You have to start over, even with basic, you know, underwear. And every item of clothing has to be new. You start from scratch with everything. And so it's kind of an expensive thing. I went to work. I couldn't find a job. I applied for over 100 positions. I got a few interviews. Every time I went in for an interview, they kind of looked at me and smiled and said, you know, we don't think you're qualified, or we think you're overqualified, or you're underqualified, or you're not qualified. Eventually, I got a job driving a cab in San Francisco, DeSoto cab, which quite honestly turned out to be one of my favorite jobs in my life. Believe me, driving a cab from 5 in the afternoon till 3 in the morning in San Francisco is one of the most fascinating positions you can possibly have, because there's nothing you don't see. You see everything in the world in San Francisco at that time. Unfortunately, I wasn't a very good cab driver. I really liked the job if somebody else had drive the car. I had, you know, like 4 accidents in a year, and they finally called me in and said, you know, it has nothing to do with who you are or what you look like. You're just a bad cab driver. And so they fired me. After that, I didn't have a job, and so I got evicted from my apartment and ran into one of the angels in my life. Everybody has angels as we go through life, and I ran into one of them, a friend of mine who offered that I could stay with her, and so I moved to Guerneville for a few months and stayed with her. Moved back here for a few months and stayed with another good friend of mine, and basically couch surfed for a period of time until I could find work, and I kept looking for work during all this period. I came into some money through my family estate, and I ended up in 2000 going to Thailand and having surgery. which is kind of an interesting thing to do. You know, it's interesting when you go to Thailand. After having surgery, you'd go down. I thought it was kind of interesting going down and seeing some of the Thai girls, because the Katoi, which are the Thai trans people, are kind of famous worldwide, because Thailand in many cases is seen kind of as a sex capital. And you go down and talk to these girls, and you couldn't really talk to them, and so they would look at you and they would kind of wonder where you were in your transition, and the way they would explain it is they go cut cut chop chop, and that was kind of a question, and so you'd always say yes or no, cut cut chop chop, and of course at that point it was yes for me, and so I kind of see my life, as I mentioned before, kind of before cut cut chop chop and after cut cut chop chop, and that's kind of how I've gone forward.